I am so glad to have you here. Welcome to our story family. Follow my story until the end and comment down below which city you are watching from. You are not invited to the wedding. Please, do not make this any harder. That was the message. There was no greeting, no warning, just those words blinking on the screen while I stood in front of the ironing board, smoothing out the wrinkles on Alex's shirt. It was the exact same shirt he had asked me to iron for his rehearsal dinner. I stared at the message, the iron suspended in the air, the steam rising toward my face as if it needed to fill the silence for me. At first, I thought it had to be a mistake. I called him immediately, but there was no answer. I called again. Nothing. A few seconds later, a new message popped up. It is Kate's day. We have decided. We have decided. I set the iron down carefully. My hands were shaking. I reread both messages over and over again. I felt as if the room was tilting slightly, as if I had stepped off a curb I did not see coming. I sat down on the edge of the couch. The silence in the house felt heavier than usual. There was no television on, no kettle boiling, just the faint ticking of the kitchen clock marking the exact moment my son told me I did not belong on the most important day of his life. I picked up the phone again. I typed, "Why?" And then I deleted it. What could I possibly say that would not sound like begging? Instead, I wrote, "I thought I was helping." There was no reply. I had chosen the florist, spoken with the venue, and sent my guest list, which was only 6 names, all from our side of the family. I had even paid the deposit for the catering service because they were short on cash that week. I did not do it for the credit. I did it because I loved him. But maybe love does not count when it is no longer convenient. I stood up, folded the shirt, and placed it over the back of the dining chair. I would not be needing it anymore, and apparently, neither would they. I walked into the kitchen and deleted the wedding reminder from my calendar. I sat at the kitchen table with my cooling coffee and tried to remember the very first thing I gave up for Alex. It might have been the vacation I canceled when he got strep throat in the 2nd grade, or the night shifts I picked up when he wanted to join the travel soccer team. Over time, everything blurred together. Nights, years, vacations. I worked 3 shifts a day for months when he was in college. I worked 2 jobs when he started medical school. We had 1 car for the 2 of us. He had it during the week. I took the bus on the weekends. When he graduated in that blue gown, I stood at the very back of the crowd. Nobody noticed me crying except the mother of another student, and she handed me a tissue without saying a word. I never told Alex that I had sold my engagement ring to help with the down payment on his apartment in New York City. He was already so proud of himself. I did not want to tarnish that with my sacrifice. Then came the engagement. I was thrilled when he told me about Kate. "She is brilliant," he said. "You will love her." I tried. I really did. I brought her flowers the first time they came over for dinner. I offered to help with the planning. Just a little guidance, no pressure at all. When the contracts arrived, I signed a few as a guarantor to secure the best rates. The venue manager knew me from my days as a nurse. I had saved his wife's life in the intensive care unit, a handshake and a signature. Later on, the deal was done. Kate had smiled and called me her wedding angel. That was 4 months ago. Now they are telling me that my presence would make things tense, as if love ever made things easy, as if love was not built on tension and release, sacrifice and silence. I gave without keeping score, but apparently someone was keeping track of where I stood, and the verdict was out. I opened the drawer where I kept the wedding folder, the one with receipts, vendor contacts, and timelines, and I ran my fingers over the labeled tabs. I really had no idea who was listed on everything. The morning sun streamed through the window of my small apartment on the Upper West Side of the city. It was a modest but cozy place, bought with the savings from 30 years of working as a nurse at Mount Sinai Hospital. It was an apartment that could have been much bigger if I had not paid for Alex's medical school. I poured myself another cup of coffee, determined this time to drink it before it got cold. On the fridge, held up by a magnet, was a photo of Alex on his graduation day. His radiant smile, the degree in his hand, and me in the background, barely visible but infinitely proud. I remembered the night he received his acceptance letter to Columbia University. He had jumped all over the apartment, waving the paper around like it was a victory flag. "I did it, Mom! I got accepted!" His eyes were shining with tears of joy. "I could not have done it without you." In that moment, I knew that every single sacrifice had been completely worth it. Every extra shift, every simple meal, every postponed vacation, it was all so he could have the opportunities I never had. My phone rang. It was Sarah, my daughter, the voice of reason in the family, although lately she seemed to have forgotten that. "Mom, how are you?" Her voice sounded cautious, as if she were testing dangerous ground. "I have been better," I replied, trying to keep my voice from revealing how much my chest hurt. "I guess you already know about the wedding." There was a pause. "Yes, Alex called me last night." "Look, Mom, I know you are hurting." "Hurting?" I let out a bitter laugh. "Sarah, I was just told that I am not welcome at my own son's wedding. How would you feel?" "But maybe you should just let them have their moment," she said quietly. "Kate is under a lot of pressure with the preparations, and her family is, well, you know how they are." "So I am the stress," I said dryly, "the annoying mother who needs to be pushed aside." Sarah did not answer right away. She just let out a soft sigh. "It is their day, Mom." I hung up before I said something I would regret, or worse, something I would have to apologize for later, just to maintain a peace that was never mine to uphold. I stared at the phone in my hand, remembering all the times I had called Alex when he was in college, just to make sure he was eating properly. The nights I spent by his side when he had a fever during his final exams. The thousands of tiny sacrifices that add up to a life completely dedicated to being a mother. The phone vibrated again in my hand. I was hoping it was Sarah, or even Alex, calling with an apology. But the name that popped up on the screen surprised me. Richard, my ex-husband. I had not heard from him in almost a year. But there he was, calling as if nothing had happened, as if we still exchanged greeting cards on Christmas. "Hello, Valerie," he said way too casually. "I hope you are doing well." I did not answer. "Look, I am just reaching out to everyone to collect each person's share for the group wedding gift," he continued, filling my silence. "We are putting money together for a surprise down payment. Something special for Alex and Kate." I continued to say absolutely nothing. "It is $3,000 per person," he went on. "Just wire it to my account whenever you can. I will handle all the logistics." I blinked. "Richard, I am not invited to the wedding." He paused. Then he scoffed, as if I had just mentioned the weather. "This is not about that, Valerie. Do not be petty. It is for the kids, for the family." My jaw clenched so tight I thought something might break. Family. That word, they only ever used it when they needed something. "I am not going to contribute," I said evenly. He laughed as if I had just told a bitter joke. "Are you sure you want to play it like this?" But I had already ended the call. There was no goodbye, no explanation. I stood there in the quiet, looking at the wedding folder resting on the table. Not a single one of them had bothered to ask if I was okay. They only called to see what else I was willing to give. They did not realize that I had already given the absolute last thing I would ever give, and I still had the contracts to prove it. I opened the wedding folder slowly, as if it might burn me, but inside everything was in neat columns, paper clips, tabs, and schedules. Everything Kate wanted was programmed, confirmed, and secured. And almost everything, I realized as I flipped through the pages, carried a name at the bottom. My name. Venue, Valerie Martin. Florist, Valerie Martin. Catering, Valerie Martin. Linens, music, chairs. Every single signature line had my name on it, not Alex's name, not Kate's name. It had not mattered when I offered to take charge of the paperwork. It was easier this way. I had told myself that. Fewer complications, better trust with the vendors. I knew people. I could speed things up. But now, looking at those signatures, the meaning had completely changed. I grabbed the contract for the ceremony venue. It was a beautiful botanical garden upstate that Kate had chosen after looking at dozens of photos. The price was exorbitant, but I had paid the deposit without complaining. Now my eyes stopped at a clause in the fine print. Final payment required 7 days prior to the event, or the agreement is considered void. My fingers trembled slightly as I turned to the catering contract. The exact same clause, almost word for word. And again, in the florist's contract. A thought began to form in my mind, but I pushed it away. No, I would not do that. I would not ruin my son's big day, even if he had decided that I did not belong there. My phone pinged. It was a message from Sarah. "Mom, I know you are upset, but please do not do anything rash. I talked to Alex and he says it was Kate's idea. Something about reducing stress. Do not take it personally." Do not take it personally? What could possibly be more personal than telling your mother that she is not welcome at your wedding? I found myself replying before I could stop. "You know what, Sarah? I am exhausted from being the only one who always has to understand. Have you ever asked your brother if he understands what it feels like to be treated like a convenient wallet and nothing more?" I sent the message and almost immediately regretted it. Sarah had always been the peacemaker, trapped right between her brother and me. It was not fair to take my frustration out on her, but before I could apologize, her reply came through. "I am sorry, Mom. You are right. It is not fair, but I do not know what to do. Kate has everyone walking on eggshells lately." I sighed deeply. The truth was that I did not know what to do either. A part of me wanted to call Alex and demand a full explanation. Another part wanted to cry until I ran out of tears. And a tiny part, one that I barely recognized, wanted to show him exactly what it meant to exclude me. I looked down at the contracts in front of me again. All that money, all that effort. And for what? To be tossed aside like a used tissue the second I was no longer convenient? My phone chimed again. This time it was a text from Donna, my lifelong friend, also a former nurse who became a lawyer after going to law school in her 40s. "Valerie, are you okay? You did not reply to my message from yesterday." I quickly typed back, "I need to see you. Coffee at Central Park in an hour?" Her response was instant. "I will be there." I closed the folder. I tucked it into my purse and headed to the bathroom. The mirror reflected the image of a 56-year-old woman with graying hair pulled back into a bun, worry lines etching the corners of her eyes, but still standing with a straight back and her head held high. I was the exact same woman who had raised 2 children all by myself after Richard decided that a secretary 20 years his junior was much more attractive than a nurse wife with 2 toddlers. That the very same woman who had survived all of that would absolutely survive this, too. Central Park was buzzing with activity under the bright spring sun of the city. Tourists were snapping pictures, waiters were clearing tables, and street musicians filled the air with familiar melodies. I sat down at an outdoor table at the Boathouse Cafe, which had been one of our favorite spots since we were in college. Donna arrived 5 minutes late, just like she always did, her dark hair now streaked with gray, her face marked by the same passing years as mine, but her eyes kept that sharp gleam that had turned her into an excellent attorney. "Valerie," she said, giving me a tight hug before sitting down, "you look terrible." I let out a surprised laugh. "Thank you for the compliment." "It is not a compliment. It is sheer concern. What is going on? It is not like you to ask to meet up with such urgency." I told her everything while our coffee grew cold. The message from Alex, the conversation with Sarah, and even that ridiculous phone call from Richard. Donna listened without interrupting, her brow furrowing deeper and deeper. When I finished, I opened my purse and pulled out the wedding folder. And then there is this. Donna spent the next 20 minutes reviewing every single contract, her lawyer eyes catching tiny details that I might have easily overlooked. When she got to the venue contract, she stopped, rereading a specific section several times. "Valerie," she said finally, looking up at me, "do you realize that legally you control this entire wedding?" "What do you mean?" "Your name is on all of these contracts. You are the sole client. Not Alex, not Kate. You," she said, pointing to a specific clause. "And according to this, if the final payment is not made 7 days prior to the event, the agreement is nullified and the deposit is completely non-refundable." "I already paid the deposits," I said, not entirely understanding her point. "Exactly. The deposits are in your name. If you decide not to make the final payment, the wedding effectively does not happen. At least not at this venue, nor with these flowers, nor with this caterer. I sat there, staring at her, slowly grasping what she was actually suggesting. But I cannot do that. It is my son's wedding. A wedding you are not even invited to, she replied softly. Despite the fact that you are paying for the whole thing, I would be canceling the entire wedding. Donna shook her head. Not necessarily. You could simply renegotiate certain aspects of it, scale back the scope of the services instead of canceling them entirely. You still hold all the legal power here. I took a sip of my coffee, which was now completely cold, while I weighed her words. I do not want to ruin his big day. I am not suggesting you do that, Donna said. But you do have options. You are under absolutely no obligation to fund an event from which you have been explicitly banned. I stayed quiet for a long moment. Then I asked, "What would you do?" Donna smiled, but there was no joy in it. I would probably do something I would highly regret. That is exactly why it is a good thing you are not me. She gathered the contracts and handed them back into the folder. Whatever you decide to do, just remember that you are not the villain here, Valerie. You are a mother who has given everything for her children, and now you find yourself being treated like a total stranger. You have every right to protect yourself. I do not want revenge, I said, and it surprised me to realize that it was the absolute truth. I just want respect. Sometimes, Donna said, closing the folder and sliding it right back across the table to me, respect has to be taught. It does not always come naturally. Our waiter walked over, and Donna ordered another round of coffee. While we waited, I looked around the park, observing the families, the couples, and the friends sharing moments together. How many of those relationships were hiding deep wounds just like mine? There is another option, Donna said after a moment. You could renegotiate partially, keeping some services while cutting back on others, just to show you have leverage without completely wrecking the day. I looked at her with curiosity. How exactly would that work? You could, for instance, keep the ceremony venue but cut the catering in half, or keep the floral arrangements but cancel the live music, just enough to send a clear message without destroying the wedding. I considered her words carefully. It was a middle ground solution, one that would express my deep hurt without looking vindictive, but even as I thought about it, a small part of me rebelled against the idea. Why should I have to compromise at all? Had I not spent my entire life compromising, giving, and yielding? What is the actual deadline to make this decision? I asked. Donna checked one of the contracts again. According to this, final payments must be made exactly 7 days prior to the wedding, so you have 3 weeks to figure this out. 3 weeks, that was plenty of time to think, to calm down, and to do the right thing, or whatever the right thing even meant in this terrible situation. Thank you, Donna, I said, putting the folder away safely in my purse. You have given me a lot to think about. Just remember, she said, reaching across the table to hold my hand, whatever it is you decide, make sure you can live with it, not just tomorrow, but 10 years from now. I nodded, so incredibly grateful for her wisdom. As we said our goodbyes outside the cafe, Donna hugged me tight and whispered in my ear, "And just for the record, if my son ever treated me like that, I would cancel the whole damn wedding and fly to Hawaii with the cash." That made me laugh, and it was the very first moment of genuine lightness I had felt since I received that text message. That night, all alone in my apartment, I spread every single contract out on the kitchen table. I studied them under the warm yellow light, mentally running through all of my options. I could easily cave in, just like I always had, pay for everything, and sit at home on the day of the wedding, pretending it did not hurt me. I could cancel everything, an act of sheer rebellion that would satisfy my wounded pride, but could potentially destroy my relationship with Alex forever. Or I could find a middle path, a pure act of self-defense that was not just blind revenge. My phone pinged with a text. It was Sarah again. "Mom, I spoke with Alex again. He says he will reconsider if you promise not to interfere with Kate's plans. Please, just think about it." I felt a massive wave of pure indignation wash over me. Reconsider? as if it was some kind of grand favor they were doing for me. And what exactly did not interfere even mean? Was I supposed to stay quiet, smile, and nod my head while they treated me like a total stranger at my own son's wedding? I did not reply at all. Instead, I opened up my laptop and started searching for flights. I did not know exactly what I was going to do about the wedding just yet, but I knew one thing for sure. I was not going to be in the city when it happened. I was not going to sit alone in my apartment, imagining the ceremony, the first dance, and the family photos from which I had been completely excluded. Maui popped up in my search results. Golden beaches, turquoise waters, and the towering Mount Haleakala sitting right on the horizon. It was a place where nobody knew my name, where I could simply be a woman enjoying the warm sunshine, not a rejected mother. I found a small apartment available to rent, located right across from Kaanapali Beach. The dates matched up perfectly with the week of the wedding. It was expensive, much more than I would normally ever spend on myself, but for once in my life, I decided that I truly deserved it. I booked the flight and the apartment before I could even change my mind. The booking confirmation popped up on my screen, and along with it, I felt a strange mixture of sweet relief and solid determination. Now, what to do about all those contracts? I opened a new blank document on my laptop and started typing. They were not cancellation emails. Not just yet. It was more of an inventory, a detailed accounting of everything I had invested into this wedding, not just financially, but emotionally too. The venue deposit upstate, $5,000. The catering, a $3,000 deposit. The floral arrangements, $1,500. The live music, the chairs, the table linens, the list just kept going on and on. In total, I had invested almost $20,000 into a wedding that I was not even invited to attend. This was money I had diligently saved for years, thinking about the future, about potential medical emergencies, and about my eventual retirement. I poured myself a large glass of red wine and sat right by the window. The city lights flickered in the distance, an urban constellation that I normally found quite comforting. But tonight, every single light felt like a tiny accusation staring back at me. I remembered Donna's heavy words. Just remember, whatever it is you decide, make sure you can live with it. Could I live with myself if I just canceled the whole thing? Could I live with myself if I did absolutely nothing? The answer arrived with surprising clarity. I could not bring myself to cancel the entire wedding. That would be an act of pure revenge that simply did not represent who I was as a person. But I also could not just blindly fund the entire event with zero consequences. Doing that would be allowing them to treat me like a bank instead of treating me like a mother. I went back to my laptop and opened up my email account. Starting with the ceremony venue, I typed, "Dear management of the Hudson Botanical Gardens, I am writing to you as the primary contractor for the event scheduled for August 30th under the name of the Martin and Duran wedding. Following recent changes in family circumstances, I find myself needing to modify the terms of our current agreement. I will be keeping the reservation for the main ceremony space, but I wish to formally cancel the following additional services: the outdoor reception tent, the extended cocktail hour service, and the premium garden lighting package. Please adjust the final billing estimate accordingly and confirm that the deposit already paid will fully cover the remaining services. Sincerely, Valerie Martin." I was not canceling the ceremony at all. I was just trimming the fat. Alex and Kate would still get to have their wedding, but it would not be the massive extravaganza they had initially planned out. I followed up with similar emails for the catering service, cutting the 5-course dinner menu down to a standard 3 courses. For the florist, I eliminated the most elaborate floral arches but kept all the essential bouquets. For the music, I completely canceled the live dinner orchestra but kept the DJ for the dance floor. In every single case, I left just enough for a very beautiful wedding, but eliminated the lavish extras, all those luxurious little touches they had so heavily insisted on having. When I finished, I saved all the emails as drafts. I was not going to send them just yet. I was going to give myself a few days to think it over, just to make sure I was not acting purely out of pain or raw anger. I stood up and walked into my bedroom. I opened the closet and stared at the dress I had bought specifically for the wedding, an elegant, pale green silk suit that I had found at Nordstrom. I had chosen it so carefully, wanting to look my absolute best without drawing too much attention away from the bride. I took it off its hanger and laid it gently on the bed. Then I dug out my biggest suitcase and started packing for Hawaii. Light sundresses, sandals, plenty of sunscreen, and the 2 novels I had been putting off reading for months. While I was carefully folding my clothes, I felt this strange sensation of sheer lightness. For the first time in a very long time, I was actually choosing myself. Not Alex, not Sarah, and not the heavy expectations of anyone else. Just me. And it honestly felt so good. The very next morning, I reviewed the draft emails one more time. They still seemed completely fair to me. A solid compromise between fully surrendering and seeking total revenge. I scheduled them to send automatically in exactly 1 week, right before the final payment deadline hit. Then I grabbed my phone and typed out a quick message to Alex. I have decided to respect your choice not to include me in your wedding. I will be completely out of town that week. I have made a few adjustments to the arrangements that I paid for, reducing certain extras, but keeping all the core essentials intact. The vendors will contact you shortly with the updated details. I sincerely wish you a beautiful day, Mom. I hit send before I could even regret it, and then I powered my phone completely off. Whatever was going to happen next was just going to happen. But I would be sitting on a warm beach in Maui, far away from all the toxic drama, finally putting myself first after decades of putting myself dead last. And I decided, right as I zipped my suitcase shut, that this was a massive victory all on its own. What would you do if you were in my shoes? Have you ever gone through something similar? Comment down below and do not forget to follow my story for part 2. The airplane descended over Hawaii, revealing the deep blue of the Pacific Ocean, contrasting sharply with the lush green of the island. From my window seat, I could see the majestic Mount Haleakala rising high above the clouds, looking both imposing and serene at the exact same time. I felt a tight knot form in my throat. I had completely forgotten how beautiful the world could be when you actually allow yourself to see it. It had been 15 years since I took a real vacation, not since right before Alex started medical school. There was always a solid reason to postpone it, a more pressing expense, or someone else who desperately needed my time or my money. The taxi ride from the airport down to Lahaina was a scenic trip filled with palm trees and endless ocean views. My small, rented apartment turned out to be even better than it looked in the online photos. It had a balcony with a direct view of Kaanapali Beach, a tiny but functional kitchen, and a soft bed with crisp sheets that smelled faintly of fresh lavender. I dropped my heavy suitcase and stepped straight out onto the balcony. The afternoon sun warmed my skin as I took a deep breath of the salty ocean air. For just a moment, just one fleeting moment, I forgot the deep pain that had brought me all the way out here. I unpacked my things methodically, putting every single garment in its proper place, a deeply ingrained habit from a lifetime of order and careful planning. Sitting at the very bottom of my suitcase was my cell phone, which had been powered off for 3 whole days. I stared at it for a long second, highly tempted to turn it back on, but I decided to just leave it dead. This was my time now. I spent the entire afternoon walking along the shoreline, feeling the warm, golden sand slip right between my toes. Families with little kids were busy building sandcastles, older couples were strolling hand in hand, and pale tourists were working on their tans under the bright sun. Absolutely nobody knew me out here. Nobody expected a single thing from me. I was, for the very first time in decades, just Valerie. I stopped at a tiny little beachfront cafe and ordered a glass of local white wine. The bartender, a friendly young guy with an easy smile, asked me if I was on vacation. Yes, I replied, honestly surprised by how incredibly good it felt to say that out loud. A long overdue vacation. Well then, welcome to Maui, he said, pouring me a slightly heavier pour of wine than the standard glass. Time moves a little differently around here, much slower, much better. I smiled right back at him, feeling grateful for that tiny act of kindness. While I sipped my cold wine, I noticed an older gentleman sitting just a few tables away. He had silver hair and was reading a thick book, occasionally looking up to stare out at the distant horizon. There was something about his quiet stillness that felt deeply familiar to me, a specific type of loneliness that I easily recognized. When the bartender walked past my table, I asked him for my check. "It is already paid for," he said, nodding his head over toward the man with the book. "Mr. Mike over there said it was a welcome gift to the island." Surprised, I looked over at the man, who was now watching me with a very faint smile on his face. He raised his glass in a tiny toast from across the patio. I hesitated for a brief second before I returned the friendly gesture. He walked over to my table, tucking his book neatly under his arm. "I hope I was not being too forward," he said in a deep, very calm voice. "But Paul told me that you were on a long overdue vacation, and I think that deserves a proper celebration." "You are very kind," I replied, although it really was not necessary. "The most beautiful things in life rarely are necessary," he said with a warm smile. "May I?" he asked, pointing to the empty chair right across from me. I nodded my head, feeling quite intrigued despite myself. "Michael Smith," he introduced himself, extending his hand across the table. "Valerie Martin," I replied, shaking it firmly. His palm felt a bit calloused, but his grip was very gentle. "First time in Maui?" "Yes." "You seem to know the area pretty well." Mike smiled. "I have lived right here for the past 5 years. I retired from the university and decided that if I was going to stare at the ocean every single day, I better do it for real, and not just in paintings." "Were you a professor?" "Literature, at Yale University. I spent almost 40 years explaining Hemingway and Fitzgerald to younger and younger students." His smile turned a little nostalgic. "And what about you?" "If it is not too much to ask, I am a nurse at Mount Sinai Hospital in the city. 30 years in the emergency room and the intensive care unit." Mike bowed his head with deep respect. "A very noble profession. Saving lives must give you a level of satisfaction that very few of us will ever know." "Sometimes," I said, thinking about all those nights I had come home far too exhausted to do anything but crash right into bed, "although you frequently forget how noble it is when you are right in the middle of a brutal 12-hour shift." We talked while the sun slowly dipped toward the far horizon. Mike turned out to be a truly fascinating conversationalist, full of colorful stories about his travels, his quirky students, and all the classic books he had loved and taught. He did not ask why I was traveling alone or why I had waited so incredibly long to take a vacation, and I silently thanked him for that. When we finally said our goodbyes, the night had already fallen, and the stars were shining brightly over the dark ocean. "It has been an absolute pleasure, Valerie," Mike said. "If you ever need a local guide for the best hidden spots on the island, I will be around here tomorrow as well." "Thank you for the wine," I replied, "and for the lovely conversation. They both taste better with good company," he said with a tiny nod of his head before walking away into the night. I went back to my apartment feeling a sense of lightness that I had completely failed to anticipate. I had come to Hawaii to escape, just to lick my wounds in total solitude. I was not expecting to find what exactly? A real connection? A gentle reminder that I could still exist as something more than just Alex and Sarah's mother? Out on the balcony of my apartment, under the starry Hawaiian sky, I finally decided to turn my phone back on for the very first time in days. The screen lit up, and the backlog notifications immediately started pouring in. 12 missed calls from Sarah, 5 from Richard, and 1 single text message from Alex. "What have you done?" My stomach tied itself into a tight knot. The drafted emails to the vendors must have sent out automatically exactly as I had scheduled them. Now Alex knew that I had slashed all the fancy extras from his wedding. There were plenty more messages waiting, but I decided not to read a single one of them right now. I powered the phone down again and shoved it into the drawer of the nightstand. Tomorrow would be another day to deal with that mess. For tonight, I just wanted to remember the sweet feeling of being simply Valerie, enjoying a glass of wine with a kind stranger under the beautiful Maui sky. The next morning woke me up with the soothing sound of crashing waves and golden light filtering right through the curtains. For a split second, I forgot where I was and exactly why I was there. Then all the heavy memories came rushing back, but surprisingly, the pain felt a lot more distant today. After eating a very simple breakfast out on the balcony, which was fresh bread, local cheese, and tropical fruit, I decided it was time to face reality. I pulled the phone out of the drawer and turned it back on. The massive avalanche of frantic notifications almost made me turn it off again. 23 missed calls now, 15 angry text messages, 7 urgent emails. The crazy world I had left far behind was loudly demanding my attention. I took a deep breath and began to check everything methodically, starting with my email inbox. The wedding vendors were formally confirming the changes I had requested. The ceremony venue, the Hudson Botanical Gardens, was asking if I was absolutely sure about canceling the reception tent, given that they had already begun the initial preparations. The catering service wanted to double-check the menu reduction and warned me that this would significantly impact the overall dining experience. I replied to each one very calmly, confirming my exact instructions and authorizing the use of the previously paid deposits to cover the newly reduced services. Wherever it was necessary, I willingly accepted losing a chunk of the deposit as a penalty for making such late changes. Then I moved on to the text messages. Sarah was absolutely frantic. "Mom, what is going on? Alex is completely furious. He says you canceled huge parts of the wedding. Please, call me as soon as possible." This is spinning totally out of control. Kate is crying her eyes out. Her family is actually considering paying for the whole thing themselves. "Mom, answer me, please. I do not know what to tell them." Richard, just as it was typical for him, alternated wildly between righteous indignation and cheap manipulation attempts. "Valerie, this is completely inappropriate behavior. Fix this mess immediately. Think about your poor son. Do you really want to ruin his big special day? If you need to talk, I am here for you. We can easily resolve this like mature adults." And then, finally, the messages from Alex. "What have you done? How could you do this to us? You knew how incredibly important this was to us." Kate is totally devastated. Her family thinks you did this on purpose just to humiliate them. "Please, just fix this. I am literally begging you." And then, the very last message, sent just a few short hours ago. "I never thought you could be so incredibly selfish. If you really loved me, you would not be doing this to me." That last message felt exactly like a slap across the face. Selfish? Me? After decades of sacrificing my entire life for him, he was calling me selfish for not fully funding a wedding that I was barred from attending? I was just about to type out a furious reply when a brand new email popped into my inbox. The sender's name surprised me, Kate Duran. With a heavy sense of apprehension, I opened the email. "Dear Valerie, I hope this email finds you well. I know our relationship has not been the closest lately, and perhaps a large part of that is my own responsibility. I wanted to write to you personally regarding the sudden changes in the wedding arrangements. I completely understand that you are hurt by the current situation, and I really cannot blame you. The decision to cut down the guest list was incredibly difficult, and we probably did not handle communicating that to you very well. The honest truth is that my family has been putting a ton of pressure on exactly how the wedding should look. My mother, in particular, has very strong ideas about who should be present and how things ought to be done. When she found out how much you had participated in the planning, she felt totally displaced, as if her proper role as the mother of the bride was being usurped. I know this is not an excuse. I should have been much firmer, much clearer. Alex really wanted you to be there, but I caved to my family's pressure. It was just easier to exclude you than to stand up to my own mother. I deeply regret that. I understand the changes you have made to the vendors. Even though they have caused us certain inconveniences, I recognize that you had every single right to make them. Would it be possible for us to talk? If you are willing, I would love to try and fix this situation in a way that truly respects your feelings and also allows us to move forward with the wedding. Sincerely, Kate." I stared blankly at the bright screen, completely unsure of what to think. Kate's email was the absolute last thing I had expected. Was it genuinely sincere, or was it just another cheap attempt to manipulate me into restoring the original high-end arrangements? And what exactly did fix this situation even mean, that I should just cave in? Just like always, I left the phone sitting on the table and walked out to the balcony. The ocean stretched out right in front of me, vast and completely indifferent to petty human dramas. I took a very deep breath, letting the fresh, salty air fill my lungs. Right in that moment, I remembered something Donna had told me once. The greatest power you hold is the power to just wait. You do not have to reply immediately. You do not have to react. You can just take your sweet time. I decided not to answer any of those messages just yet. Instead, I put on my bathing suit, grabbed a soft towel, and headed straight out to the beach. The day was way too gorgeous to waste on toxic family drama. Kanapali Beach was far less crowded than the day before. I found a quiet little spot near some large rocks and spread out my towel. The sun warmed my skin as I watched the tiny waves crash softly onto the shore. "Good morning," a familiar voice said right behind me. I turned around to see Mike, carrying a different thick book under his arm and wearing a straw hat to block out the harsh sun. "Good morning," I replied, a little surprised, but definitely not unhappy to see him. "I hope I am not interrupting your solitude," he said, stopping at a very respectful distance. "Not at all," I answered, pointing to an empty patch of sand right next to me. "The beach is massive, but good company is pretty rare." He sat down, carefully placing his straw hat right over his book so the strong breeze would not blow it away. "You look incredibly worried today," he observed after a quiet moment. I had not expected to be quite so transparent. "Is it that obvious?" "After 40 years of teaching, you learn how to read faces," he said with a tiny smile. "The students always think they can hide the fact that they never read the assigned material." I smiled despite myself. "I guess I have not done my homework then. Or perhaps life has just assigned you a particularly brutal reading." I looked at him, totally taken aback by his sharp intuition. There was just something about Mike, a deep sense of calm that practically invited trust. Before I even realized it, I was telling him the entire crazy story about Alex and the wedding, the cold text message shutting me out, the binding vendor contracts, my decision to scale back the expensive services, and, finally, that unexpected email from Kate. Mike listened without interrupting me once, nodding his head occasionally, his face reflecting pure understanding with absolutely no judgment. When I finished venting, he remained completely silent for a long moment, just staring out at the horizon. "You know," he said finally, "this actually reminds me quite a bit of my very own situation with my daughter, Lucy." "You have kids?" I asked, suddenly realizing that I knew almost nothing about his personal life. "One daughter. Her mother passed away when Lucy was just 12 years old. I raised her all by myself." A dark shadow of deep sadness crossed his face. "I definitely did not always get it right. Nobody ever does," I said very softly. "That is true, but some mistakes weigh a lot more than others." He adjusted his straw hat, shielding his tired eyes from the sun. "When Lucy got engaged, about 7 years ago now, I was absolutely thrilled. Anthony seemed like a really good guy, stable, hardworking. He loved her dearly. But I was a stubborn literature professor with highly specific ideas about exactly how a wedding should look. I wanted poetry readings from famous authors, a gorgeous historical venue, and very specific old traditions, and I was very pushy. What happened? Lucy and Anthony basically ended up having 2 separate weddings, a tiny civil ceremony just for them and their close friends, and then the massive cultural production that I wanted. He let out a long sigh. I did not realize until much later how incredibly selfish I had been, how I had made their special day entirely about me and my grand desires. "How did you guys fix it?" "We spent 3 long years barely speaking to each other. Then my granddaughter, Sophie, was born." His old face completely lit up the second he mentioned her name. "Lucy allowed me to meet her, but things were still incredibly tense between us. It was actually Sophie who truly brought us back together. One day, when she was barely 4 years old, she asked me why Daddy and Grandpa were always so serious whenever they were in the same room together. He smiled fondly at the old memory, out of the mouths of babes. And how are things now? Now we have a very different kind of relationship. It is not perfect, but it is real, with firm boundaries and mutual respect. He looked directly into my eyes. The real question here, Valerie, is exactly what kind of relationship you want to have with your son and your future daughter-in-law after this is all over. His heavy words made me reflect. What did I actually want out of this? Bloody revenge? No. Pure justice? Maybe. Genuine respect? Absolutely. But above everything else, I still wanted to be a real part of Alex's life, even if it had to be in a very different way than I had originally pictured. I do not know how to respond to Kate's email. I finally admitted out loud. Perhaps you do not need all the answers right this second, Mike said. Sometimes we just need to take the very first step and see exactly where it leads us. We spent the rest of the morning chatting about much lighter topics. The absolute best restaurants on the island, his favorite classic books, my crazy experiences working as a nurse. By the time we finally said our goodbyes, I felt much more centered, much more clear-headed. Back in my apartment, I grabbed my phone and typed out a quick reply to Kate. Kate, thank you so much for your message. I genuinely appreciate your honesty and your willingness to talk through this very difficult situation. I still need a little more time to process everything. I am currently on vacation in Hawaii, taking a much-needed break. I promise I will get back to you with a fuller answer in a few days. In the meantime, please understand that the changes I made were not done out of malice, but strictly out of self-preservation. Valerie. I hit send on the email and then fired off a very brief text to Sarah. I am perfectly fine. In Hawaii, taking some time just for myself. We will talk when I get back. I love you. As for Alex and Richard, I firmly decided not to answer them just yet. Some heavy conversations simply needed real time and space to develop properly. That night, while I was eating dinner at a tiny local spot highly recommended by Mike, my phone buzzed with a fresh notification. It was a reply from Kate. Thank you for getting back to me, Valerie. Take all the time you need. Enjoy your trip to Hawaii. I have heard it is absolutely gorgeous. I will be right here whenever you are ready to talk. There was a new tone in her message that I had never noticed before in any of our previous interactions. Pure respect. Perhaps, I thought while I savored a delicious piece of local fish, this trip was not just a runaway escape. Maybe it was actually the beginning of something entirely new. 3 peaceful days drifted by in a very pleasant routine. Long mornings spent out on the beach, sometimes meeting up with Mike for deep conversations that covered everything from classic literature to modern politics, lazy afternoons exploring Lahaina or simply reading out on my balcony, and quiet nights dining at tiny little restaurants where the waiters were already starting to recognize my face. I had successfully managed to keep all the toxic family drama at bay, replying briefly to Sarah, exchanging a few polite messages with Kate, and completely ignoring Richard. But on the 4th day, while I was eating breakfast out on the balcony, my cell phone rang loudly. It was not a text message this time, but an actual phone call. It was Alex. My very first instinct was to ignore it. What could he possibly say that would not just result in more pain? But something deep inside me, perhaps that fresh perspective I had gained over the last few days, made me slide my finger right across the screen. Hello? My voice sounded a lot more hesitant than I would have liked. Mom. Alex's voice sounded incredibly tense, as if he was fighting back some very strong emotions. You finally picked up. I am on vacation, Alex. Something I really should have done years ago. There was a heavy silence. Then he spoke again. Why did you do it? Why did you cancel the reception tent, the extended catering, all of it? I took a very deep breath before I answered. Are you seriously asking me why I refused to pay for all the luxury extras of a wedding that you explicitly told me I was not invited to? It is not that simple. Explain it to me then. I have plenty of time. I was honestly surprised by the absolute calm in my own voice. There was no hot anger, just a firm determination to never be belittled again. There was another silence, much longer this time around. When he finally spoke again, his voice sounded entirely different, far less accusatory, and much more vulnerable. "I do not even know where to begin," he said finally. "Starting from the very beginning would be fine. Why did you exclude me from your own wedding, Alex?" I heard him take a very deep breath over the line. Kate was incredibly stressed out. Her mother was taking total control of everything, demanding that things be done exactly her way. And then there was you, always jumping in to help, always right there. Kate's mother started complaining that it felt like she was dealing with two mothers-in-law. She said it felt like it was your wedding, not theirs. So you decided to completely exclude your own mother instead of properly handling your future mother-in-law. "It was not like that," he protested, but there was not much conviction behind it. Kate was trapped right in the middle of it all. Her mom basically threatened not to attend if things were not done her way. I just wanted to keep the peace, at my expense. He stopped right in his tracks. "I guess so. I am so sorry, Mom. It was not fair at all." His apology completely caught me off guard. I was expecting more wild accusations, more anger, not this genuine acknowledgement. "No, it absolutely was not," I said softly. "I have spent my entire life putting your needs completely first, Alex. I literally sold my engagement ring to help you out with the down payment for your apartment in the city. Did you know that?" "What?" His voice sounded genuinely shocked. "No, I had absolutely no idea." "Of course you did not. I never told you. I did not want you to feel guilty or forever in my debt. But that is exactly what mothers do, Alex. We sacrifice everything without ever expecting any recognition. But there is a massive difference between not expecting a thank you and being treated as if I do not even exist." "Mom, I did not." He stopped himself again. "I have always felt like I owed you everything. For everything you did after Dad walked out on us, the double shifts, the endless sacrifices. Sometimes that is just overwhelming." "Overwhelming?" "Yes. Like I could never possibly pay you back enough. Like I am constantly failing in comparison to everything you gave up for us." I had never once considered how my massive sacrifices could have felt like a heavy burden to him. The idea left me completely speechless for a moment. "And then," Alex continued, "when Kate and I started planning out the wedding, it felt like my big chance to finally do something entirely on my own, to prove that I could handle something important without relying on you at all. But then you started jumping in to help, signing vendor contracts, paying for huge deposits. Because I just wanted to help you," I said. "Because I love you. I know that. But it made me feel like a little kid all over again. Like you did not trust that I could pull it off by myself. That was never my intention. I know that now. But when Kate's mother started pushing back on the guest list about who should really be there, it just felt easier to cave in. And to send me a cold text message telling me that I was not invited." There was a very long silence. "There is absolutely no excuse for that," he said finally. "It was cowardly and it was cruel. I am so sorry, Mom. I am truly sorry." I felt warm tears starting to well up in my eyes, not out of pain this time around, but from something much more complex. It was a messy blend of sweet relief at finally being seen and deep sadness over all the wasted time and broken trust. "Alex, you will always be my beloved son, and I will always love you, but I cannot keep being treated like a convenient emotional and financial ATM. I need you to start respecting me as a real person, not just as your mother." "I know," he said softly, "and I promise I will try. Kate will too. She is genuinely sorry about how we handled all of this." Her email actually seemed quite sincere, I acknowledged. "It really is. She is super embarrassed by how she just let her mother dictate everything." He took a slight pause. "Mom, I know the vendor changes you made are locked in and we fully accept them. But will you still come to the wedding? It just will not be the same without you there." It was the exact question I had been both waiting for and dreading. Was I really ready to forgive them so completely? To just show up as if none of this awful stuff had ever happened? I do not know, Alex. I need some more time to think. Of course, he said very quickly. Take all the time you need. Just please think about it. I will, I promised, but I cannot give you a final answer right now. I completely understand. He paused. Are you doing okay out there, in Hawaii? The sudden question actually surprised me. It was the very first time in our entire conversation that he had shown any real interest in my well-being. Yes, I am doing fine. It is incredibly beautiful out here. I really should have done this years ago. I am so glad for you, Mom. I truly am. And for the very first time in a very long time, I actually believed him. When we finally ended the call, I sat out on the balcony for a very long time, just staring off at the vast ocean. That heavy conversation with Alex had cracked something wide open inside of me. It was a sudden realization that perhaps we had both contributed to our toxic dynamic, albeit in very different ways. My endless sacrifices, made purely out of love, had accidentally created an impossible debt in his mind. His harsh rebellion, even though it was expressed in a deeply hurtful way, was partially just a desperate attempt to find his own identity completely separate from my long shadow. It absolutely did not justify what he had done to me, but it definitely made it a lot easier to understand. And maybe, just maybe, this painful episode could serve as the catalyst for a much healthier relationship moving forward. Later that afternoon, while I was taking a walk down the beach, I spotted Mike sitting right in his usual spot, reading quietly under his big straw hat. He looked so incredibly peaceful, so completely grounded in the present moment that I almost did not want to interrupt him. But when he looked up and saw me, his kind face lit up with a very warm smile. "Valerie," he greeted me, "I was actually just thinking about you." "Really?" I asked, sitting down right beside him on the warm sand. "Yes, I was wondering if you had spoken with your son yet." As a matter of fact, I did, just this morning. And, if it is not too indiscreet, I told him all about our conversation, Alex's unexpected apology, his reasoning, and his brand new invitation to the wedding. Mike listened very closely, nodding his head every so often. When I finished, he spoke. "That sounds like a very promising start, but I still do not know if I should actually go to the wedding," I admitted out loud. A part of me feels like showing up would just be telling them that what they did to me was perfectly fine. Or could it be a solid step toward an entirely new kind of relationship, he suggested. One that is not based on the past, but on exactly who you choose to be for each other right now. His words deeply resonated with something I had been feeling but just could not put into proper words. "How did you know?" I asked him. "How did you know exactly what to say to me?" Mike smiled, looking a bit sad. "Because I was the Alex in my own story, and I spent years wishing that my father had possessed the kind of quiet wisdom that you are showing right now." We sat in silence for a long moment, just letting the soothing sound of the ocean waves fill the space between us. "Do you know what might really help?" Mike finally said, writing it all down, not necessarily to send it to them, but just to clear up your own thoughts. Like keeping a journal? More like a long letter. To Alex, to Kate, or even just to yourself. Put exactly what you are feeling into words, what you want for the future, and what you actually need to heal. The idea actually had a lot of merit. "I will give it a try," I said. "Thank you so much, Mike. Do not mention it," he smiled. "Now, would you like to hear about the absolute best seafood restaurant on the entire island? It is a tiny little place down by the harbor that the tourists never manage to find." The rest of the afternoon slipped away in very light conversation and occasional bursts of laughter. Mike just had this unique gift for making even the most mundane stories sound totally fascinating. By the time we parted ways, the sun was just starting to set, painting the sky in gorgeous shades of orange and bright pink. Back in my apartment, I actually followed Mike's advice. I pulled out my laptop and opened up a blank document. "Dear Alex," I typed, and I just let the words flow out of me. The days in Hawaii passed by in a lovely mix of contemplative calm and moments of unexpected joy. Mike had quickly become a regular companion on my island explorations, showing me hidden coves, authentic little hole-in-the-wall restaurants, and local markets overflowing with bright color and life. Our friendship was growing so naturally, with absolutely zero pressure or weird expectations. It was incredibly refreshing to hang out with someone who saw me simply as Valerie, not as the mother of someone, or the ex-wife of someone, or any of those other heavy roles that had defined my identity for so very long. Meanwhile, I was maintaining a cautious but very cordial line of contact with Alex and Kate. Our talks, which were mostly done through text messages, had become much more honest and way more open. Sarah had also started to show a totally different side, much more understanding, and far less willing to just play the mediator without actually taking a firm stand. The actual day of the wedding dawned incredibly bright and clear in Maui. I knew it the very second I woke up, even though I had tried so hard not to mark the exact date in my mind. My cell phone was unusually dead silent. I figured everyone back home was insanely busy with the morning preparations. I brewed myself a strong cup of coffee and stepped out onto the balcony. The ocean looked particularly blue today, almost as if it was throwing a quiet little celebration of its own. I felt a sharp pang of nostalgia, a sudden moment of deep doubt. Should I really be over there? Had I made a massive mistake by keeping my distance? My phone vibrated with a brand new text. It was from Mike. Good morning. Do you feel like taking a walk down the beach this morning? There is a tiny hidden cove I would love to show you. I smiled. Mike seemed to possess a sixth sense for knowing exactly when I desperately needed some company. I would absolutely love that, I replied. Should we meet up at our usual cafe in about half an hour? Perfect. The hidden cove that Mike wanted to show me turned out to be quite far away from all the busy tourist spots, and it was accessible only by walking down a tiny dirt path winding through the rocks. When we finally got down there, I fully understood exactly why he had wanted to bring me here. It was a place of almost completely unreal beauty. Crystal clear waters painted in vivid shades of turquoise and deep blue, fully protected by towering volcanic cliffs and absolutely empty of any other tourists. This is stunning, I said, kicking off my sandals just to feel the incredibly soft sand between my toes. I stumbled upon it totally by accident during my very first year living out here, Mike explained. I was a little lost, both literally and metaphorically speaking. I had just retired. Lucy and I were barely even speaking to each other, and I just felt completely unnecessary, like my life had already run out of its purpose. And then I found this spot. I came out here almost every single day, sometimes just to sit down and stare blindly at the ocean. There is something about these wild, natural spaces that constantly reminds us of just how tiny we really are, but not in a depressing sort of way, more in a freeing way. He smiled. At least that is exactly how it felt to me. We sat right down on the warm sand, simply soaking in the bright sun and the salty sea breeze. After a little while, Mike pulled a small paper notebook straight out of his pocket. I figured today might be a pretty good day for this, he said, handing it over to me. What is this? I asked, grabbing it from him. A quiet place to write out that letter we talked about. Sometimes it is just a whole lot easier with a real pen and some paper than it is with a glowing screen. The thoughtful gesture moved me quite deeply. Thank you so much, Mike. That is incredibly considerate of you. He also pulled out a pen and handed it over. There is absolutely no rush at all. I am going to take a walk along the rocks and look for some cool fossils. Take all the time you need. While Mike slowly walked away, I cracked open the little notebook. The pages were completely blank, just waiting to be filled up. I took a long, deep breath and I started writing. Dear Alex, today is your wedding day. As I sit here writing these words down, you are probably getting yourself ready for one of the most significant moments of your entire life. I hope it is everything you want it to be. I am not there, and that hurts, but it has also given me something I desperately needed. Time and space to think, to breathe, to remember who I am besides your mother. My entire adult life has revolved around you and Izzy. Every decision, every sacrifice, every moment of joy or worry. I do not regret it, but now I understand that maybe it was not always the healthiest thing, neither for me nor for you. When you excluded me from your wedding, I felt as if that whole life dedicated to you meant nothing, as if I were disposable, convenient only when you needed something from me. I reacted from that pain, and although I do not regret standing up for myself, I am sorry if my actions caused more division between us. What I want now is a relationship based on mutual respect, where we both acknowledge our mistakes and our needs, where I can be your mother without sacrificing my identity, and you can be my son without feeling the weight of an impossible debt to pay. I do not know exactly what that relationship will look like, but I am willing to figure it out with you, if you are too. I love you, Alex. I always have, and I always will, but now I am also learning to love myself. With love, Mom. Tears were streaming down my cheeks when I finished writing. They were not tears of sadness, but of liberation, as if I had finally expressed something that had been trapped inside me for far too long. I was so absorbed that I did not notice Michael coming back until he sat down quietly next to me. "Did it help?" he asked softly. I nodded, wiping away my tears. "A lot. Thank you." "You are welcome." He looked out at the horizon. Words have power, even when we only write them for ourselves. We sat in silence for a moment, simply enjoying the peace of that hidden spot. "You know what?" I finally said. "I think I am going to send it. Not today, but soon." Michael nodded in approval. "I think that is a good idea." My phone, which had been silent all morning, suddenly vibrated with an incoming call. It was Izzy. With some apprehension, I answered. "Izzy?" "Mom." Her voice sounded strangely upbeat. "How are you doing?" "I am doing well," I answered cautiously. "Should you not be at the wedding?" "About that," she paused. "There have been some changes." My heart raced. "What kind of changes?" "The wedding is still happening, but smaller. Much smaller. Just immediate family and a few close friends." "What happened?" Izzy sighed. "Kate's mother tried to take complete control after the changes you made. She insisted on paying for everything herself, but with strings attached, lots of strings, including that Alex change his last name to Kate's family name. He did not do it," I said, more as a statement than a question. "Of course not." And Kate finally put her foot down. She said she was tired of everyone trying to make their wedding something it was not, so they canceled everything and put together a small ceremony in a friend's backyard. Without Kate's family, except for her little brother. I was speechless for a moment. Are they okay? Surprisingly, yes. Alex says he feels like a huge weight has been lifted off his shoulders, and Kate looks happier than I have seen her in months. Izzy paused. "Mom, they want you to come back. Both of them. They say it is not too late for you to be a part of this if you want to." The offer left me momentarily breathless. A part of me wanted to say yes immediately, to catch the first flight back to Chicago. But another part, the new Valerie I was discovering in Hawaii, knew it was not that simple. "Izzy, I appreciate the invitation. I really do, but I cannot just show up like that, as if nothing happened." "I get it," Izzy said, surprising me with her understanding. "I will tell them you need time, but Mom, they are truly sorry, and I think they learned something important from all of this." "So have I said softly. "Tell them I love them and that I am glad they found a way to make their wedding meaningful for themselves. I will write to them soon." When I ended the call, Michael was looking at me with a mix of curiosity and concern. "Seems like there have been some interesting developments," he noted. I briefly told him what Izzy had shared. Michael listened carefully, nodding occasionally. "Life has funny ways of teaching us its lessons," he said when I finished. "Sometimes what looks like a disaster turns out to be exactly what everyone needed." "It seems so," I agreed, though I never would have predicted this outcome. "So what now? Are you heading back to Chicago?" I thought about the question for a moment. Not yet. I have this condo rented for another week, and I found out I quite like Hawaii and your company. Michael smiled, a warm gleam in his eyes. "I am glad to hear that. Maui has a lot more to offer, and so do I, if I may say so." I felt an unexpected blush rise to my cheeks. It was the first time in years I felt that mix of nervousness and anticipation, as if I were on the edge of something new and exciting. "I would be thrilled to find out," I replied with a smile. The rest of the day passed with a lightness I had not felt in a long time. Michael and I explored the little cove, found some interesting seashells, and had lunch at a small seaside diner where the fish had been caught that very morning. We did not talk anymore about the wedding or my family. Instead, we shared stories from our youth, books we had loved, places we had visited or dreamed of seeing. As the sun began to set, we headed back to Lahaina, walking slowly along the boardwalk. There was a feeling of possibility in the air, as if this day marked not just the end of something, but also a beginning. "One last coffee before we say goodbye?" Michael suggested as we got near my condo. "I would love that," I answered. At the coffee shop, with the night falling softly over the island, Michael raised his mug in a little toast. "To new beginnings," he said, "and to having the courage to choose oneself." I clinked my mug against his. "And to unexpected friendships that show up right when we need them the most." Michael smiled, his eyes crinkling at the corners in a way I found more and more endearing. "Valerie," he said after a moment, "I was wondering if you would like to have dinner with me tomorrow. Not at just any coffee shop or restaurant, but at my house. I make a homemade chili that has been praised even by native Texans." The invitation was clearly more than just a simple dinner between friends. It was a step towards something different, something more. "I would love to try that chili," I replied, surprised by my own boldness, "and the company sounds even better." When I finally got back to my condo that night, I found a message from Alex waiting for me. "Mom, I know Izzy told you about the changes with the wedding. I just wanted to tell you that even though we missed you today, I understand why you needed space." Kate and I have learned a lot these past few weeks. About ourselves. About what truly matters. Whenever you are ready, we would love to see you. With all our love, Alex and Kate. Attached was a picture. The two of them in a simple but beautiful backyard, dressed elegantly but without the pomp they had originally planned. They were smiling, not the tense smiles of people posing for a formal portrait, but the genuine smiles of truly happy people. I replied with a simple text. "You both look radiant and happy. I am deeply happy for you. Let us talk when I get back to Chicago. With all my love, Mom." Afterward, I stepped out onto the balcony and looked at the stars over the Hawaiian Ocean. The day I had dreaded so much had passed, and even though it had not gone the way any of us had imagined, maybe it had happened exactly the way it was supposed to. For the first time in a long time, I felt hope. Not just for my relationship with Alex and Kate, but for myself, for the woman I was outside my role as a mother, for the life I could build now, centered around my own desires and needs. And maybe, just maybe, that life would include a retired literature professor with a passion for books, the ocean, and apparently a Chicago nurse who was learning to find herself all over again. What would you do in my situation? Have you ever experienced a moment that felt like an ending but turned out to be a new beginning? Comment down below, and do not forget to subscribe to our story family for the third and final part. The plane began its descent into Chicago under a sky tinted orange and purple. Below, the city unfolded like a tapestry of blinking lights, familiar and foreign all at once. It had been only 2 weeks since I left for Hawaii, but it felt like I had been gone for years. Or maybe it was I who had changed. I looked at my reflection in the small window. The island tan had given my skin a golden hue, and there was something different in my eyes, a spark I did not remember seeing in a long time. "First time in Chicago?" the woman sitting next to me asked, misinterpreting my gaze. "No," I smiled. "I am going home, though maybe to a different version of it." The woman nodded, as if she understood perfectly what I meant. Maybe she did. The landing, the baggage claim, the cab ride to Lincoln Park, everything passed in a strange blur of autopilot and novelty. When I finally unlocked the door to my apartment, I stopped at the threshold, looking at it as if it were a stranger's home. Everything was exactly as I had left it, but now I saw it with fresh eyes. The antique furniture I had kept for decades out of practicality rather than taste. The beige walls I had never repainted because there were always more important expenses. the few framed pictures, all of Alex and Izzy at different stages of their lives. Where was I in this apartment? Where were my tastes, my desires, my personality? I left my suitcase by the door and walked slowly through the rooms, noticing every detail with renewed clarity. In the kitchen, the calendar still showed August, with the date of Alex's wedding marked with a red circle that I had now crossed out with a line, a tangible reminder of how this had all started. My phone vibrated with a text. It was Michael. I hope you made it safely back to Chicago. Hawaii already seems a little less bright without you. I am here whenever you want to talk. Remember to take a deep breath before every family gathering. It works, I promise. I smiled, feeling a warmth spread through my chest. During our last week together, our friendship had blossomed into something much deeper. We had not put any labels on it or made promises, but there was a connection that neither of us intended to deny. The dinner at his house had turned into several more. Long evenings filled with conversation, laughter, and a slow realization that at our age, life could still offer wonderful surprises. We had said goodbye with a soft kiss and a promise to stay in touch, with no pressure or expectations. I texted him back. I made it back fine. The apartment feels strangely foreign now. I think it needs some changes, just like its owner. Thanks for the advice about breathing. I will put it into practice tomorrow when I see Alex and Kate. I set my phone down and headed to the bathroom to take a shower. The hot water eased the tension of the trip, but it could not wash away the anticipation I felt for tomorrow's meeting. Alex had suggested we meet at a neutral coffee shop, a new spot where none of us had any history or turf. I had accepted immediately, grateful for his consideration. That night, as I tried to sleep in my familiar bed that somehow no longer molded perfectly to my body, I thought about the words I had written in the journal Michael gave me. I had brought it with me, tucked safely inside my carry-on bag throughout the whole trip. Should I show it to Alex, or were those words just for me, an exercise in clarity and release? With that thought floating in my mind, I finally fell asleep, lulled by the distant sound of Chicago traffic that had been the soundtrack of my life for so many years. The next morning, I woke up with renewed determination. Before meeting with Alex and Kate, I had something important to do. Start claiming this space as truly mine. I ate a quick breakfast and then headed to Macy's. 3 hours and an amount of money that would have seemed outrageous to me before later, I came back with bags full of new throw pillows in shades of blue and green that reminded me of the Hawaiian Ocean, a couple of art prints I had admired for years but never allowed myself to buy, and paint for my bedroom and living room walls. It was not a complete renovation, but it was a start, a symbolic act of reclamation and reinvention. I spent the next few hours moving furniture and covering the floor with drop cloths. I would not have time to paint before my meeting, but everything would be ready for when I got back. A tangible promise to myself that things would be different from now on. At 4 in the afternoon, I was standing in front of the mirror getting ready to leave. I chose a dress I had bought in Hawaii, a deep blue that highlighted my tan and made me feel confident. I put on a little makeup, more than I usually wore, and pulled my hair back into a loose bun that let a few silver strands escape. I was not trying to look younger, just more like myself. Before leaving, I grabbed Michael's journal and slipped it into my purse. I still had not decided if I would share it, but I wanted to have it with me, like a lucky charm, or maybe as a reminder of the woman I had started to become on that faraway beach. The coffee shop Alex had picked was near Millennium Park, a modern place with large windows and a sunny patio. I spotted him as soon as I walked in. He was sitting at a corner table with Kate right beside him. Both looked nervous, constantly glancing toward the door. When they saw me, their expressions changed. Alex looked momentarily thrown off, as if he did not fully recognize the woman walking toward him. Kate, whom I had always found conventionally beautiful, offered a shy but genuine smile. "Mom," Alex said, standing up to hug me. The hug was slightly awkward, both of us aware of the emotional space between us, but it was also genuinely warm. "You look different," he noted as we pulled apart, "radiant." "It is the Hawaiian sun," I said, even though I knew it was much more than that. Kate also stood up to greet me, offering a kiss on the cheek. "Thank you for coming, Valerie," she said with a formality that gave away her nervousness. "Thank you for inviting me," I replied, trying to make her feel at ease. We sat down, and a waiter immediately came over to take our order. I chose a latte, Alex got an espresso, and Kate ordered an herbal tea. All three of us avoided ordering food, as if implicitly acknowledging that our stomachs were too tied up in knots to eat. An uncomfortable silence settled in briefly as the waiter walked away. It was Kate who finally broke it. "Valerie," she began, her voice steady but with a slight tremble, "I want to personally apologize to you. My behavior was inexcusable. I let the stress and pressure from my family dictate decisions that hurt people who are important to me, especially you." The sincerity in her voice surprised me. It was not the rehearsed apology a part of me had expected. "We shut you out after everything you had done for us," she continued, "and while I cannot change the past, I want you to know that I am deeply sorry for the pain we caused you." "We are both sorry," Alex added, reaching across the table to hold my hand. "It was cowardly and cruel. There is no excuse." I took a deep breath, remembering Michael's advice. "I appreciate your apologies," I finally said, "and I accept them. But I need you both to understand something. Accepting your apologies does not mean that what happened is forgotten or that it did not hurt. It means I am choosing to move forward, to build something new with you instead of holding on to the pain." They both nodded, their faces showing a mix of relief and understanding. "I also want to apologize," I continued, catching them off guard. "Not for standing up for myself, I do not regret that, but maybe for not setting clear boundaries sooner, for having unknowingly created a dynamic where my love and sacrifice became a burden to you, Alex." My son looked at me with watery eyes. "I never wanted you to feel that way, Mom. I have always been tremendously grateful for everything you did for us." "I know, sweetie, but gratitude can turn into debt, and debt into resentment if it is not handled right. I think we both need to learn how to interact as the adults we are now, not as the roles we have played for so long." The waiter came back with our drinks, giving us a moment to process what had been said. When he walked away, Kate spoke up. "Could I ask you about Hawaii? Alex mentioned it seemed like you found something important there." The question felt genuinely curious, with no hidden agenda. I smiled, thinking of the golden beaches, the conversations with Michael, the woman I had started to rediscover out there. "I found space," I finally said. "Space to breathe, to think, to remember who I am besides a mother, a nurse, an ex-wife, and also," I hesitated, but then decided to be completely honest. "I met someone who helped me see things from a new perspective." Alex's eyes widened slightly. "You met someone? Like a boyfriend?" he asked, though the word did not fully capture what Michael meant to me. "A retired professor who was also navigating his own family complications. He helped me figure out a few things about myself, about you guys, about forgiveness." "I am happy for you, Mom," Alex said, and he sounded sincere. "I am truly happy." "What about the wedding?" I asked, subtly shifting the subject. "How did it end up going?" Their faces lit up at the exact same time, an unconscious reaction that told me more than any words they could have spoken. "It was perfect," Kate said. "Small, intimate, meaningful. Everything we really wanted, but had not allowed ourselves to have." "Jason's backyard, remember?" Alex added. "Just 20 people. Izzy was my best woman. Kate's brother Dylan brought his guitar and played during the ceremony. We ate barbecue and danced under the stars." "That sounds wonderful," I said, and I meant it. It sounded exactly like the kind of wedding I would have pictured for my son before everything got so messy. "It was better than it would have been at the original venue," Kate said with a conviction that caught me by surprise. "Without all that pressure, without trying to impress people we do not actually care about." "And your family?" I asked cautiously. Kate sighed. "They are still upset. My mother is not speaking to me. My father tries to play peacemaker, but he is stuck in the middle. Dylan is the only one who was there to support us." "I am sorry," I said honestly. I knew the pain of a fractured family all too well. "Do not be sorry," she answered firmly. It was my choice, and it was the right one. Someday they will understand, or they will not. But I am not going to live my life to meet their expectations. There was a strength in her voice I had never noticed before, a resolve that made me see her in a completely new light. Maybe this young woman and I had more in common than I had ever realized. "We have something for you," Alex said, pulling an envelope out of his pocket. "It is not much, but we wanted you to have it." I opened the envelope with curiosity. Inside were several photographs from the wedding, pictures captured by a friend with a talent for photography. Alex and Kate exchanging vows, dancing under backyard string lights, laughing with their friends. There was a natural feel to these photos that no professional photographer could have ever captured. "They are beautiful," I said, feeling a mix of joy for their happiness and a sting of sadness for not having been there. "Thank you for sharing these with me. Next time you will be in the pictures," Alex said with a hopeful smile. "Maybe for our anniversary, or," he looked at Kate with a knowing glance, "when we have other family milestones to celebrate. We would love to have you more present in our lives," Kate added. "If you want to, of course." "I would like that," I said, surprised by how easily the words came out. "But I need you both to understand something. I am going through a process of change. I am rediscovering who I am, what I want for the rest of my life. That means our relationship is going to change too. I need to set boundaries, and I expect you to respect them." "Of course," Alex said quickly. "Whatever you need." "It is not just about what I need," I clarified. "It is about what we all need. Healthier, more honest, more equal relationships." They both nodded, and for the first time since our meeting started, I felt like they were really seeing me. Not as the self-sacrificing mother, not as the difficult mother-in-law, but as Valerie, a complex woman with her own needs and desires. That was when I decided to share what I had written. I pulled the journal out of my purse and opened it to the page where I had written my letter to Alex. "I wrote this on your wedding day," I said, sliding it over to Alex. "I think it explains how I feel better than anything I could say right now." Alex picked up the journal carefully, as if it were something fragile and precious. He read it silently, his expression shifting subtly with every line. When he finished, he handed the journal to Kate, who read it with just as much attention. "Mom," Alex said when they were both done, his voice thick with emotion. Thank you for sharing this with us. It is exactly what we needed to hear, and what we needed to understand," Kate added, handing the journal back to me. "About mutual respect, about building a new relationship." Our drinks had gotten cold, forgotten during our conversation. The waiter came by to ask if we wanted anything else, and this time all three of us ordered a second round, along with a selection of appetizers to share. Our appetite had returned, along with a lightness we had not felt at the beginning. While we waited for the food, the conversation flowed into more everyday topics. Alex's work at the hospital, Kate's architecture projects, my plans to redecorate the apartment. "Will you go back to Hawaii?" Alex asked at one point, with a genuine curiosity that took me by surprise. "Probably," I admitted. "There are reasons to go back." "The professor?" he suggested with a playful smile that reminded me of the little boy he used to be. "Among other things," I replied, feeling a blush I had not experienced in decades, but also because I liked who I was out there. Freer, more present, less defined by my roles. "You should do it," Kate said enthusiastically. "And maybe someday we could visit you there, if that does not intrude on your space, of course," she added quickly. "That could be nice," I said, surprised by how much I actually meant it. "Maybe in a few months, when we have all had some time to settle into this new dynamic." When we finally said our goodbyes almost 3 hours later, the hugs were more natural, less forced. Everything was not perfectly resolved, of course. There would be more difficult conversations, more adjustments, more moments of uncertainty, but we had taken an important first step toward a more authentic and balanced relationship. As I walked back to my apartment, I felt a spring in my step that I had not experienced in Chicago in a very long time. The city looked brighter, more alive, or maybe I was just more awake to notice it. In my pocket, my phone buzzed with a text. It was Izzy. Alex told me about your get-together. He says you are different in the best way possible. Coffee tomorrow? I have so many questions about Hawaii and a certain professor. I smiled, typing back a yes. My relationship with Izzy had always been less complicated than the one with Alex, but it needed to evolve too, and it looked like she was willing to put in the effort as well. When I got back to my apartment, the smell of fresh paint welcomed me like a promise. I took off my shoes and walked barefoot over the drop cloths, admiring the paint cans waiting to be opened, the new throw pillows still wrapped in plastic, the art prints waiting to be hung. My phone buzzed again. This time it was Michael. How did the big meeting go? I hope it went well. The sunset here was not as beautiful without you to share it with. I just discovered a little restaurant in Paia that I think you would love. Just saying. I texted him back while changing into comfortable clothes, ready to start painting. Better than I expected. There is hope. And speaking of hope, I am thinking about heading back to Hawaii soon. Seems like there is a restaurant in Paia I need to check out, and a sunset I want to see again. 1 week after our coffee shop meeting, my apartment was almost unrecognizable. The living room walls now sported a soft shade of sage green that reminded me of the volcanic landscapes of Hawaii. My bedroom, meanwhile, had been transformed with a deep blue that mirrored the Pacific Ocean, seen from that secret cove Michael had shown me. The antique furniture stayed, but it was recontextualized with the new pillows, prints, and a few decorative items I had bought at flea markets over the weekend. The apartment finally felt like my home, not just a place where I lived. Izzy had been blown away during our coffee date, commenting that she had never pictured her mother being so modern. I took the comment as the compliment it was meant to be, though it made me think about how my kids had seen me all these years. Predictable, practical, with no time for frivolous things like interior design or personal preferences. That afternoon, while I was enjoying a cup of tea in my newly updated living room, the doorman buzzed to let me know he was bringing up an envelope. The elegant handwriting on the outside was unfamiliar to me, but the return address in the top left corner took me by surprise. Kate Duran. Intrigued, I opened the envelope carefully. Inside, I found several pages of high-quality stationery covered in that same meticulous handwriting. "Dear Valerie," the letter began. "After we met up the other day, I felt like there was so much more I wanted to say to you, things that maybe I did not know how to express properly in person. Sometimes I find it easier to organize my thoughts in writing, a habit my father, who is also an architect, instilled in me since I was a little girl. First, I want to thank you again for your openness and your willingness to start over. I know we did not deserve it after how we treated you, and your generosity of spirit deeply moves me. I want you to know a little bit more about me, about my family, and about how I ended up making choices that I now deeply regret. I grew up in a family where appearances were everything. My mother, Louise, comes from old money that went broke, but she never got over the loss of her former status. My father, Anthony, is a brilliant man but weak when faced with my mother's iron will. Dylan, my little brother, was always the rebel, the one who dared to defy her openly, while I opted for diplomacy and the illusion of conformity. Ever since I was a little girl, I learned that a woman's worth in our family was measured by her ability to marry well and keep up social appearances. I studied architecture not because I was passionate about it, though now I cannot picture myself doing anything else, but because my mother considered it a suitable profession for a young woman from a good family, creative yet respectable, intellectual yet feminine. When I met Alex during a project we collaborated on, he representing the hospital, me designing the new pediatric wing, I fell in love not only with his intelligence and compassion, but also with his authenticity. Alex was genuine in a way that nobody in my family circle ever was. My mother, of course, approved of the relationship. A doctor was a good catch, although she lamented that he did not come from a prominent family. When we got engaged, she immediately started planning what she called the proper wedding. Big, flashy, a social spectacle rather than a celebration of love. I tried to push back at first, but years of conditioning made me slowly cave in. Alex, wanting to make me happy, went along with her ever-growing demands. And then you showed up, Valerie, offering practical help, real contacts, concrete solutions, instead of my mother's grandiose fantasies. At first I was grateful, genuinely grateful, but my mother saw your involvement as a threat to her control. This woman is making the decisions that belong to me as the mother of the bride, she would constantly complain. She has no class, no standing, and she is planning my daughter's wedding. I should have stood up to her then. I should have defended your generosity and your practical approach. Instead, I let her poison slowly drip in, wearing away my gratitude until it turned into resentment. I started viewing your help as an intrusion, your generosity as a form of control, and then the crisis hit. My mother threatened to boycott the wedding completely if we did not limit your involvement. Her or me, she declared dramatically. Alex, caught between his love for me and his loyalty to you, begged me to find a middle ground. But I, cowardly and exhausted by the constant drama, suggested the easiest way out, shutting you out. What followed was the cruelest text message I have ever allowed to be sent. I drafted it, Valerie. Alex hit send, but the words were mine. It is my shame, my guilt, and I will live with that for the rest of my life. When we got the news that you had canceled the vendors, my mother saw her opening. She offered to pay for everything, to restore the original vision, but with strings attached. Total control over the guest list, the menu, the decor. She even suggested that Alex consider adding our family's last name to his to carry on the lineage. That was when I finally saw things clearly. I saw what I had allowed to happen. How I had betrayed not only a generous woman who just wanted to help, but also my own values and desires. The confrontation with my mother was explosive. Words that had been left unsaid for decades finally came to light. It ended with her declaring that I was no longer her daughter if I went through with that farce of a wedding. That night, Alex held me while I cried, not out of sadness but out of relief. For the first time in my life, I felt authentic. Together, we decided to take back our wedding, to make it small, intimate, meaningful. And it was perfect, Valerie. The only thing missing was you. I am telling you all of this not to make excuses, but so you can understand the context behind my actions. I was weak when I should have been strong, cruel when I should have been kind, but I am determined to be better, to be worthy of the second chance you have so generously offered us. Our family, the one Alex and I are building now, will have different values. Honesty over appearances, authenticity over social expectations, love over obligation. And we hope you will be a part of that family, on your own terms, with whatever boundaries you need to set. My mother is still not talking to me, but I am at peace with that. My father calls me in secret, torn between his loyalty to her and his love for me. Dylan, my adored rebel brother, supports me unconditionally and has become an unexpected bridge between Alex and me and the rest of my family. I do not know if I will ever fully reconcile with my mother. Part of me hopes so, the little girl still seeking her approval. But the woman I have become, the woman Alex loves, and the one you have helped emerge through your example of dignity and strength, that woman no longer bases her worth on anyone's approval. And for that, once again, thank you. Thank you for your strength, which inspired me to find my own. Thank you for your dignity in the face of cruelty, which taught me to value authenticity over comfort. Thank you for giving us this second chance, which I promise I will not waste. With sincere affection and hope for our future, Kate. When I finished reading the letter, I realized there were tears streaming down my cheeks. They were not tears of sadness or pain, but of recognition. Recognition of a truth that all women face in one way or another. The pressure to conform, to please, to put other people's expectations ahead of our own needs. Kate and I were more alike than I ever could have imagined. We had both fought to find our voice, our identity, under the weight of impossible expectations. The difference was that she had found her strength a lot sooner than I did. I grabbed my phone and sent her a text. Kate, I just read your letter. It moved me deeply. Would you like to come over for coffee at my place tomorrow? I would love to show you my new apartment and continue this conversation in person. Her reply came almost instantly. I would love to. At 11 o'clock, I can bring pastries from the bakery near our place, if that sounds good to you." "Perfect," I replied. "See you tomorrow." That evening, as I was making dinner, I caught myself humming a song, something I could not remember doing in my kitchen for years. The apartment felt different, I felt different, and for the first time in a long time, the future seemed full of possibilities instead of obligations. My phone rang with a video call. It was Michael, true to our routine of talking every night since I returned to Chicago. "Valerie!" he exclaimed when I picked up, his face lighting up on the screen. He was sitting on his patio, the setting Hawaiian sun creating a golden halo around his silhouette. "You look radiant tonight." "It is the new paint," I joked, turning the camera to show him the newly colored walls. "Matches my mood." "Beautiful," he said, and I knew he did not just mean the decor. "Tell me about your day." I told him about Kate's letter, about our scheduled meeting for tomorrow, about how I was starting to see my daughter-in-law in a completely new light. "Sounds like you are building bridges," he noted. "New bridges," I corrected. "I am not rebuilding what was there before, but creating something different, something healthier. That is the best way to do it," he said approvingly. "And when will you build a bridge back to Hawaii?" I smiled at his transparency. "Soon, very soon. Maybe after the family dinner Izzy is hosting this weekend." "A family dinner? That sounds significant." "It is. Alex and Kate will be there, of course, and surprisingly Ray too." I grimaced at the mention of my ex-husband. "The infamous ex? Now that will be interesting. Izzy insists that we are all rebuilding relationships, so we should include him. But I suspect it has more to do with the fact that Ray is paying for her kitchen remodel." Michael laughed, a warm sound that even across the digital distance made me feel like I had company. "Well, I will be eager to hear all the details, especially how he reacts when he sees the new Valerie." "The new Valerie?" "Yes, the woman who knows exactly what she is worth and who refuses to accept anything less." His words made me smile. I liked the sound of that. We talked for another hour, about everything and nothing at all, the conversation flowing with that ease I had found so refreshing from the very beginning. When we finally said our goodbyes, with promises to call the next day, I stared at the darkened screen for a moment. Who would have thought that at 56 years old I would be experiencing something so unexpected? Not just making up with my son, not just a renewed relationship with my daughter-in-law, but also this connection with Michael that defied labels but felt more authentic than any relationship I had had in decades. Life, I thought as I got ready for bed, had a funny way of surprising us right when we thought all the surprises were behind us. Saturday arrived with a mix of anticipation and nerves. The family dinner at Izzy's place would be the first time we all got together since the wedding. Alex and Kate, Ray, Izzy and her boyfriend Charlie, and me. A complete family circle, but with completely reconfigured relationships. My get-together with Kate had gone surprisingly well. What started out as coffee stretched into hours, both of us sharing stories, discovering unexpected similarities, laughing over the absurdity of some family traditions. When she left, she hugged me spontaneously, a gesture that surprised me with how natural it felt. "We should have done this a year ago," she said as she headed for the door. "Sometimes we have to take the long way around to get to where we are supposed to be," I answered, surprising myself with wisdom that sounded a lot like something Michael might have said. As I got ready for dinner, I carefully picked out my outfit. A blouse and pants combo in shades of blue I had recently bought, accessorized with a silver necklace Michael had given me before I left Hawaii. "To remind you that the ocean is always waiting," he had said as he placed it in my hand. It was a simple piece, but beautiful, a tiny silver wave suspended from a delicate chain. Izzy's apartment was in Wicker Park, a vibrant and bohemian neighborhood that perfectly reflected her artsy personality. When I arrived, Alex and Kate were already there, helping to get the final dinner details ready, while Charlie, Izzy's boyfriend, a musician with a beard and tattoos who had initially seemed intimidating to me, but turned out to be incredibly sweet, was making cocktails. "Mom!" Izzy hugged me tightly. "You look gorgeous. Is that outfit new?" "Everything is new lately," I replied with a smile. Alex came over to say hi, his hug much more natural than last time. "The change looks good on you, Mom," he said quietly. Kate joined us, kissing me on both cheeks like we were old friends. "Valerie, that necklace is beautiful," she commented. My hand instinctively went up to touch it. "A gift," I said simply, but my smile must have given away more than I intended, because Izzy and Kate exchanged a knowing glance. The doorbell rang before they could interrogate me. Ray had arrived. An expectant silence fell over the room as Izzy went to get the door. It had been almost a year since I had seen my ex-husband, and our last encounter, at Izzy's birthday, had been politely distant. Ray walked in with his usual confidence, a bouquet of flowers in one hand and an expensive bottle of wine in the other. At 58 years old, he was still conventionally handsome, though his dark hair now showed gray at the temples and he had put on some weight around his waist. He was wearing a casual suit that I knew cost a fortune, his usual hallmark of financial success. "Izzy, sweetheart," he exclaimed, hugging our daughter. "Charlie, good to see you again." A handshake for Izzy's boyfriend. "Alex, my boy, congratulations on the wedding." A hug for our son. "And you must be Kate." Delighted to finally meet the woman who won my son over. A kiss on the cheek for my daughter-in-law. Finally, his eyes landed on me, and for a moment he looked genuinely surprised. "Valerie," he said, with an inflection I could not read, "you look different." "Hello, Ray," I answered calmly. "It has been a while." He leaned in to kiss my cheek, a gesture I accepted politely, but without enthusiasm. "You look radiant," he said, studying me with curiosity. "Did you do something different?" "A lot of things," I replied cryptically. Izzy, always hypersensitive to social tension, chimed in, "Let us sit down. Charlie made some amazing cocktails, and dinner is almost ready." We headed to the small dining room, decorated with candles and fresh flowers. Izzy had always had a knack for creating cozy atmospheres. I found myself seated between Alex and Kate, with Ray directly across from me. I was not sure if Izzy had planned this seating arrangement on purpose, but I felt strangely protected, flanked by these two people with whom I had forged a new understanding. The conversation flowed surprisingly well. Alex talked about a new research project at the hospital. Kate shared details about an architecture competition she had just won. Izzy and Charlie told us about their plans for a small recording studio in the apartment. Ray, true to his nature, dominated much of the conversation with stories about his triumphs at the law firm, where he was now a senior partner. I caught myself watching him with a detachment that surprised me. There was a time when his stories would have made me feel small, insignificant by comparison. Now I simply saw him for who he was, an insecure man who constantly needed external validation. "And you, Valerie," he finally said, addressing me directly for the first time all evening. "What have you been up to?" Izzy mentioned something about a trip to Hawaii. I felt everyone's eyes turn to me. Yes, I spent 2 wonderful weeks in Hawaii. It was transformative. "Transformative?" Ray repeated with a hint of condescension. Wow, I did not know beach vacations could be so profound. In the past, his tone would have made me shrink. Now, I just smiled. Life can surprise us at any age, Ray. Sometimes we just need to be open to it. Mom met someone special in Hawaii, Izzy chimed in with a mischievous grin. Really? Ray's surprise seemed genuine. A holiday romance, Valerie? Does not seem like your style. Maybe you do not know me as well as you think, I answered calmly. People change. I have changed. Evidently, he muttered, studying me with new eyes. And does this gentleman have a name? Michael, I said, offering no further details. Michael, Ray repeated. And he is? A retired literature professor, I replied, from Northwestern University. Ah, Ray said, visibly more relaxed now that he could categorize Michael as harmless. An academic. Interesting. The conversation drifted to other topics, but I noticed Ray glancing at me occasionally with an expression I could not completely decipher. Curiosity? Surprise? Maybe even a touch of jealousy? After dinner, while Izzy and Charlie were serving coffee and dessert, Ray asked me for help carrying some plates into the kitchen. a transparent excuse to talk in private, but I decided to play along. "You look good, Valerie," he said once we were alone in the kitchen. "Really good. I do not remember ever seeing you like this. Relaxed, confident." "Thank you," I said, offering nothing more. "Is it serious, this thing with the professor?" I took a beat before answering. "We are exploring the possibilities," I finally said. "At our age, labels matter less than the connection." "I understand," he said, though his expression suggested otherwise. "You know, sometimes I have thought about how things would have been and—" "No," I cut him off gently. "Let us not go there, Ray. The past is closed. We have both moved on." He looked at me as if really seeing me for the first time in years. "You have changed." "Yes," I agreed. "I have changed. I am happy for you," he said, and to my surprise, he seemed to mean it. "You deserve it." Before I could answer, Izzy walked into the kitchen. "Everything okay in here?" "Perfectly," I replied, grabbing the dessert plates. "Your father and I were just catching up." When we got back to the dining room, the atmosphere had shifted subtly. There was a lightness, a feeling that something that had been tense for far too long had finally loosened up. Charlie proposed a toast. "To second chances," he said, raising his glass, "and to new connections." We all raised our glasses, even Ray, who surprisingly added, "and to Valerie, who seems to have discovered the secret of youth in Hawaii." I smiled, accepting the compliment with a nod. "It is not youth, Ray. It is simply being at peace with oneself." The rest of the evening flew by with a camaraderie I would not have thought possible just a month ago. Izzy and Charlie played a few songs. Kate shared more wedding pictures she had not shown me before. Alex told funny stories from the hospital that had us all laughing. Even Ray seemed more relaxed, less desperate to impress, sharing a few surprisingly humble stories about his own mistakes and learning moments. When it was finally time to say goodbye, there was a round of genuine hugs. Ray, the last one to leave alongside me, stopped at the door. "Valerie," he said with a seriousness he rarely showed, "I am really happy for you, for this new version of you." "Thank you, Ray," I replied. "I am happy for me too." We walked together down to the street where our paths would split. "Will you go back to Hawaii soon?" he asked. "Next week," I confirmed, "just for a few days to see how things go." He nodded understandingly. "Good luck then. You deserve it." "We all do," I said, "a second chance to do better." He surprised me by giving me a quick hug before walking away. "Goodbye, Valerie." "Goodbye, Ray." As I walked back to my apartment under the starry Chicago sky, I reflected on the night. It had not been perfect, of course. There were moments of awkwardness, of adjustment, of memories that still stung. But it had been real, authentic, a first step toward something new. My phone buzzed with a text from Michael. "I hope the family dinner went well. Here is a sunset that would have been perfect to share with you. Soon." Attached was a photo of the sun sinking into the ocean, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple so vibrant they looked unreal. I sent him back a picture Izzy had taken tonight. All of us around the table, smiling, glasses raised in a toast. Dinner went better than expected. Family, in all its complicated forms. "I will see you soon. Very soon." His reply was immediate. "I will be waiting, with books, wine, and sunsets." And as I put my phone away and kept walking under the Chicago stars, I felt a quiet certainty settle into my heart. I did not know exactly what the future would look like, but for the first time in decades, I was excited to find out. 1 year later, the afternoon sun was streaming through the large windows of my new condo in Lahaina, Hawaii, lighting up the family photos decorating the walls. In one, Izzy and Charlie at their recent civil wedding, smiling and carefree. In another, Alex and Kate holding their newborn baby, my granddaughter Lucy, named after Michael's daughter. My life had changed in ways I never would have imagined that afternoon when I received the text from Alex cutting me out of his wedding. What had started as an act of self-defense, a temporary escape to a faraway island, had turned into a complete reinvention. It had not been an easy or linear process. There were tough conversations, moments of doubt, minor relapses into old patterns, but slowly, With determination and honesty, I had rebuilt my relationship with my kids on much stronger foundations. Mutual respect, clear boundaries, and an understanding that true love should never come at the expense of personal dignity. Michael walked into the living room carrying 2 mugs of coffee. At 61 years old, with his fully silver hair and kind eyes, he still seemed like the most handsome man I had ever met. We did not live together full-time. He kept his house near the beach. I split my time between Chicago and Hawaii, but we had found a rhythm that worked flawlessly for us. A mature relationship that respected our independence while celebrating our connection. "Nervous?" he asked, handing me a mug. "A little," I admitted. "It is the first time everyone will be here at the exact same time." Today was a special day. Izzy and Charlie were flying in to spend a week with us, and Alex, Kate, and little Lucy would be joining us for the weekend. It would be the first full family reunion in Hawaii, my new part-time home. "It will go great," Michael said with that calmness that always grounded me. "They have all come out separately before. Everyone gets along." It was true. Izzy and Charlie had spent a week with us after their wedding, exploring the island and writing music inspired by the ocean. Alex and Kate had visited when Lucy was just 2 months old, looking for a break from the exhaustion of being first-time parents. And surprisingly, even Ray had briefly stopped by during a business trip to the islands, grabbing a cup of coffee with Michael and me with a friendliness that would have seemed impossible a year ago. "You are right," I said, leaning back against him on the couch. "It is just that I want it to be perfect." "It will be perfectly imperfect," he replied, kissing my temple, "like all the best things in life." My phone dinged with a text from Izzy. "We just landed. We will be there in an hour. Charlie is so excited to try that restaurant you were talking about. We love you." I showed the message to Michael, who smiled. "See? Everything is going exactly according to plan. And I made a reservation at Mama's Fish House for tonight. We will celebrate your year of freedom." "Our year," I corrected. "I would not have found this version of myself without you." "Nonsense," he answered with his classic modesty. "She was always in there, Valerie. I was just in the right place to watch her emerge." As we got ready to welcome our visitors, I thought back on the journey of the last year. After that family dinner in Chicago, I had headed back to Hawaii for what was supposed to be a 1-week trip. 1 week turned into 2, then into a month. Eventually, I made a decision. I would keep my apartment in Chicago for regular visits and occasional shifts at the hospital. I had cut back my hours, though I had not retired completely. But I would make Hawaii my primary home. The condo I now partially shared with Michael was not massive, but it had an ocean view that never failed to take my breath away. We had created a space that reflected both of us. His books filled the shelves right next to my medical texts. His guitar rested beside my nursing bag. Our intermingled photographs told the story of lives lived fully before we ever met and now enriched by our connection. Izzy and Charlie arrived exactly an hour later, loaded up with gifts and enthusiasm. My daughter hugged me tight, whispering, "You look happier every single time I see you, Mom." "I am," I simply replied. Charlie and Michael instantly fell into a debate about classical music, a shared passion that had sparked an unexpected bond between them. Izzy helped me make fresh lemonade while catching me up on her latest musical projects and her apartment renovations. "And Alex?" I asked. "How are they really doing with the baby? Their texts are always positive, but I know it is not easy." Izzy smiled. "They are exhausted but happy. Kate is a natural mom, and Alex, well, I have never seen him so in love as when he looks at Lucy. And they are so excited for this trip. They need the break, and I think they are also thrilled to see you in your new element." "My new element?" "Yeah, Mom. Hawaii looks good on you. This life looks good on you." She glanced meaningfully toward the living room where Michael and Charlie were still talking. "He looks good on you." I could not help but smile. It is good, isn't it? Sometimes I worry that it is too good, that it cannot last. "Do not think like that," Izzy said, squeezing my hand. "You deserve this. You both deserve this. After everything you have been through, you have found something beautiful together." That night at the restaurant, surrounded by the people who mattered most to me, with the promise that the rest would join us soon, I felt a wave of gratitude so intense it left me momentarily speechless when Michael proposed a toast. "To Valerie," he said, raising his glass, "who taught us that it is never too late to reclaim oneself." "To Mom," Izzy added, "who showed us that true strength lies in knowing when to step away and when to come back." "And to Family," I finished, finding my voice in all its imperfect forms and unexpected evolutions. As our glasses met in the middle of the table, I thought about that text message that had changed everything. "You are not invited to the wedding." Words that had been meant to shut me out, to erase me, but instead had pushed me onto a path of rediscovery. Words that, in the most unexpected way possible, had led me exactly where I needed to be. Not to a wedding, no, but to myself, to this new life that I never would have imagined, but that I now would not trade for anything in the world. What would you do if you faced a rejection that felt devastating? Have you ever experienced an ending that actually turned out to be a beginning? Share your experience in the comments, and do not forget to subscribe to our story family for more stories of overcoming and rediscovery. If you like this story, do not miss The Forgotten Will and The House They Denied Me, two of the channel's favorites.